Hey guys, welcome to the Sandro Linux Community Podcast. It is the 17th of... In fact, you know what? It would be better if I was recording this, wouldn't it? Hey guys, welcome to the Sandro Linux Community Podcast. It is the 17th of November 2023. And today we have a bit of an unusual one. Today we are interviewing the developer of the Android launcher Taridium. So we have Paul here. Say hello. And yeah, so we'll be asking Paul some questions about his project and also about the kind of future of his project. But after that, we'll be covering the usual tech news. Got some interesting stories this week. So a lot to be looking forward to. So starting off with the interview, why don't we get into some questions? So the first question I have is, what inspired you to, in the first place, to make an Android application? Or to start coding? Cool. That was a lot more of a kind of in-depth response than than I actually expected there. That's quite interesting. So yeah, of course, there's a lot of Android launchers out there, and some people would ask, like, why should people really pick your launcher over any of the other, like, thousands of Android launchers out there? Hmm. Yeah, I mean, having tried it myself, it's like Yeah, it's a very interesting launcher because unlike most launchers, it doesn't go by like the kind of standard kind of look that Android and iOS have had for like such a long time at this point. And of course, there are Android launchers out there that try and like emulate what a Windows phone looked like, but there's not really that many out there that are actually trying to do their own thing and trying to, you know, show a different kind of vision for how Android apps are can be displayed on your home screen, I guess. Yeah, but yeah, so that's interesting. But moving on to next question here. Are there any interesting updates coming to the app which people can look forward to if they're using your launcher? That's cool. Yeah, widgets is one of the features that I kind of couldn't find on the app, which is one of the kind of more standard Android launcher features. So it's cool that you're trying to implement that. The fact that you've already managed to implement so many of the features of an Android launcher, and yet you've got a pretty small user base at current moment is pretty cool. But oh sorry. Yeah, there's a lot of customization in there that I've seen. Yeah, with just like quite individual elements, to be honest. Like I wasn't totally sure what was changing with the colors. Yeah, but yeah, so on a bit of a kind of off topic here, just a bit of a kind of general question here. Do you enjoy gaming, and if so, what is your favorite video game? Okay. Yeah, I have not really played that many Nintendo games. Not a big Nintendo fan myself, so my knowledge on Nintendo stuff is quite limited. But yes. Um, so moving on to the next question. When did you actually start developing this launcher, and when did you first come up with the idea prior to that? So was it a kind of... Oh, sorry. Ooh. Yeah, I can imagine. That sounds like a bit of a technical challenge. Um, but yeah, so were you working on this project kind of on and off, or how much time were you kind of devoting to the project over the 8 years? Oh, so, sorry, mate. Oh, sorry. Uh, I, I just, I just realised I've been doing something pretty. You know, this is the reason why you test a lot more here. Uh, so basically, my mic input has been working, but yours hasn't. So it hasn't been recording. Oh dear. I should have checked that earlier because I could see my mic input was working, but yours isn't. So I need to quickly fix that. I think I know what might be the cause of this. But yes, I'm really sorry about this, man. I didn't mean. Uh... So what do you say? Yeah, that would probably be the best idea because yeah, I can. We can just jump straight back into it because my mic input was working. So that bit of the kind of just going into the intro, yeah, that's fine. But like the rest of it, no. So yeah, I need to fix that quickly. I'm pretty sure it's to do with my audio output settings because audio because I'm on Mac right now. There's some really annoying stuff when it comes to you have to use like a multi-output device to then capture both your like you need to capture the audio, yeah, from your computer as well as outputting that to your headphones, but I haven't got that configured. So let me just switch that over. Sound output. Okay, so say something. Okay, let me try something else then. Okay, say something now. Hmm. Is this a Mac OS update? I really hope not. Um, Let me think here. I mean, worst comes to worst, I could. I'm trying to think. How can I? I think multi-output device should work. Um, so if that's the output, then it should go into the correct thing to then allow this to work. So let me just check that this is. Say something now. Desktop audio. Okay. Device. So if that... I don't know why this isn't working. That's strange. Let me think. Why? Let me check. Yeah, that should be correct. That's strange. Yeah. Yeah, it's really... don't you... If you want to capture audio, well, don't use macOS. Because it is a pain. And yeah, I've come across this problem before, and now I updated to the latest version of macOS, macOS 14, and it's just not that straight. Yeah, it seems to maybe. Yeah, I mean, I don't like Apple products either. I made the kind of bad mistake of buying one, and now I'm like, oh, yeah. So next computer I'm getting, I'm not getting an Apple computer, but yes, but this is a good computer, but sadly it's kind of bottlenecked by the fact that it runs macOS. So let me try and fix this. B cable, because maybe it's something to do with the version of macOS. So if I install this, well, it turns out a macOS update may have stopped my may have actually stopped my audio software from working, which isn't great. Yeah. Oh, that sounds like my multi-output device is working. Okay, so let me see here. So let me see, if I switch to this, can you still hear him? Say something, please. Hang on, so you can hear it through me or not? Like, I'm confused. Okay. So just check it is not through me, because that will show a problem with the way that my capture software is working. Okay, I've reinstalled the correct thing. Now let me cut the stream. Okay, this is a lot more messy than I originally thought. But you know, not really much consolation right now. So let me... I'm sorry for the brief... hello everybody on the stream. I'm sorry for these brief technical difficulties. Basically, macOS... installed a macOS update, and now the audio capture isn't working like it should. So yeah, so we're just... I'm just trying to get that fixed right now. In fact, yeah, so I think... In fact, can somebody on the Discord say something? Sorry, just... Okay, yes, it's definitely not outputting. So, I need to fix that, but to do that, I'm going to have to reboot OBS. So, see you guys on the studios, but I can do that quickly here. Because I realise it will look very strange if I'm moving my cursor from one side of the screen and it's ending up on the other side of the screen. That's probably not what I want. So yeah, let's fix that quickly. So now, there we are. Okay, so now let's actually get started. So first, say something just
Yeah.
so we don't end it with this problem
Uh,
again. Okay, so that's about equal audio levels. That should be good. So let's get started. Sorry, guys, watching on the stream. We had some technical difficulties there, but they've been fixed. So now let's actually get started. In fact, let's just get started right now. So, hey guys, welcome to the Sandro Linux Community Podcast. It is the 17th of November 2023. So today we have an interview with the developer of Taridium, as well as the regular tech news. So let's first start with the interview. So, hello, Lord Carnage or Paul. Do you want to say
yeah,
hello?
Paul's fine.
So, what do you say?
Paul's fine.
Okay. So let's actually get started with the questions. So the first question I have for you is, what inspired you to make an Android app, or actually to start with to learn to code?
So learning to code started in early high school years. There was this kid who would sort of go into classrooms and libraries and basically anywhere where there was a computer, and he would get people to play his games that he'd made. And the concept of being able to make your own game instead of just playing them just sort of blew my mind. Um, Making an Android application, that pretty much started just because, like, any good idea starts from a desire to, like, something you're looking for and can't find. So for me, Taridium launcher came from when I had my very first phone, which was a Nokia 3310. Basically, it was like those old brick phones before smartphones. So when I bought my very first smartphone, which was a Samsung Galaxy S5, I had this idea of how like it would look and work. So I assumed the best way you could do it was if you could infinitely scroll in any direction and just place apps wherever you wanted. So when I took the phone home and I started it up, I was kind of disappointed when I seen it was all pages and you could just like put a couple of apps on the page, a widget here and there. It just seemed kind of like a lazy response, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Android launchers out there, but a lot of them just have a kind of quite standard design with the kind of default kind of Android look, and some of them try and, of course, imitate iOS or maybe even, Windows Phone if they want to go for a bit of a kind of a bit of a look which is a bit different. But with Taridium, it does seem like quite different, being able to just, kind of infinitely look around on your apps and stuff. And, like, yeah, it's a lot less of an orthodox way of doing things, but very interesting. Uh,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm quite proud of it. It's such a different way of like interacting with your phone, just being able to sort of like an open canvas, if you will, just being able to move wherever you want.
Yeah, I think if more launches were like that, then more people would actually decide to try a different launcher and not just go with the stock one. Because,
Mm,
there's not really that much. I mean, aside from like icon packs and stuff like that, there's not really
yeah.
much reason to be using a custom launcher. But, of course, adding those extra features, it gives a bit more of a reason. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think Nova launcher got as big as it did because it's just the standard launcher, but it has so many different customizable options.
Yeah, I think it did
But
really. Oh, sorry.
so yeah, it's just like the standard experience though, as you said, like it's not offering like anything like revolutionary.
Yeah, I think Nova Launcher did appeal to a lot of kind of Android geeks, I'd say. Like people who just enjoy playing around with their phone, trying different things. But I don't think it had the kind of general appeal. I mean, like, unless you're into Android customization, it wasn't really, you're not likely to have come across Nova Launcher. But
Yeah.
if more launcher developers actually try different things with design and don't just go with the standard look, then maybe more people would actually check it out, and maybe it would be more of a, I guess, more of a story.
Yeah. I think, and this is the hot take, by the way, but in my opinion, the reason why most launchers don't really do their own thing is because you can literally get the programming code for like the standard launcher and how like the paid system works from like tutorials. You don't actually have to do much.
Yeah, there's a lot of course, guidance out there on the internet on how to make different Android apps, because Android's been around for a long time and it's a very big platform. So yeah, there will be guides out there how to make Android launchers, I'm guessing. But
Yeah.
but of course, with all these Android launchers out there trying to compete, why should somebody actually pick your launcher over the hundreds, if not thousands, of other Android launchers out there?
Good question. So, in my personal opinion, the reason why someone should do that is if you look at what's out there, you'll see that most experiences you get feel pretty much the same with like a small quality of life change, or it's like, as you said, like a few minutes ago, they're imitating Windows phones or iPhones or something like that. Our Taridium launcher does something that no other launcher can do, and that is it offers you an open canvas that you can move infinitely as long as you want. Pressing the home button takes you back to the same point every time, so you don't get lost. And what that offers such a unique experience, in my personal opinion, that I feel like it's almost worth trying it just to see what that feels like.
Yeah, so that's interesting. But are there actually any updates coming in the pipeline which people who are using the app can get excited about?
Definitely. So there's two things that we're sort of working on at the moment. So one of the ones I'm most passionate about personally, for anyone that's like into techie stuff and customizing their phone, you might be aware of an app called Tasker. So if you're not aware what that is, what Tasker does is it increases what you can do with gestures on your phone. So instead of just like your normal, you use like a zoom out gesture and it opens an app. Think like you do that gesture and you can turn your Bluetooth on and off, or your Wi-Fi, like stop a song Do
from
with
playing,
gestures on
skip
your phone.
music.
So
whatever you
instead
can
of
think
just
of, basically
like your
Tasker
normal,
lets you do it.
you use like a zoom out gesture and it opens an app
at the moment
gesture,
and
and
we
you can
want to
turn
be
your
able
Bluetooth
to
your
implement that
Bluetooth on and off,
into
or your
our gesture
Wi-Fi.
system. So
You'll the options you'll have on what you can do with gestures will just skyrocket. So that's the first major thing that we want to implement. The second thing is widgets. So at the current time, because of how the app works, it every time we've implemented widgets, it's offered like a uh, bleh, sorry, it's offered a performance decline. So we decided to leave widgets support out for the launch build that we launched on the App Store, while we come up with a build that doesn't like negatively impact the user experience.
okay, interesting. Of course, without talking to the developer, you don't really know why certain features are in the app or not in the app. And, like, you're not always sure about why a developer wouldn't include something like widgets and stuff like that. But it's interesting to hear that from the performance side of things, that was actually a consideration. Yeah.
Because one of the things that became like a new thing while we were developing, because of how long the development cycle was, it was pretty standard for low like frame rates on how like the apps that you were making and things like that. But as times went on, the last like I want to say 3 years, phones have started implementing like 120 frames a second, 60 frames a second, and you have like this really seamless scrolling experience. So it was hard to keep up with that and
Open at the moment is
Yeah, I can see why that might be a performance challenge.
and especially when you consider like an infinite scrolling system, because the potential memory issues that can cause if you're not doing it properly, it just has so many like weird things that can happen.
So moving on to a different question, a bit off topic here. But do you enjoy gaming? And if so, what is your favorite video game?
So I love games. I own basically all the current game consoles and some retro stuff as well. So my current favorite game for this year personally was Dredge. And by the way, for anyone looking at the Game Awards, I hope it wins Indie Game of the Year. Terrific little indie game about a boat where you go around fishing. Favorite game of all time though would have to go to the Nintendo 64, which was Diddy Kong Racing.
Oh, okay. I've not really played around with Nintendo consoles before. I'm not really much of a Nintendo person. But yeah, that's interesting. So, moving on to something more related to your application. Do you plan to actually bring your application to any different app stores in the future?
At the current moment, the answer to that is no. The reason for that is because I'd love to be able to launch it on the Apple Store. The problem with that though is Apple doesn't allow customization on their phones. So you can't like put a launcher on the Apple Store. We haven't looked at like the Windows side of things because I don't own a Windows phone. So I don't know if they allow different launchers or anything like that, but I'm definitely open to any other storefronts like down the line.
Yeah, Windows Phone it's a dead project now, so really you can't really develop for Windows Phone anymore. So you can really only focus on like iPhone and Android, obviously. But when it comes to Android, oh sorry.
Sorry, I know BlackBerry tried their own thing for a bit, but I'm pretty sure that died too.
Yeah, pretty much all the competitors to Android and iOS died, so now there's the kind of duopoly that people complain about in the mobile space. But when it comes to Android, there are some other app stores. So, for example, if you go outside of the Play Store, if you just install APKs, you can use like Aptoid if you're going for something that's like not open source. If you're going open source, there's F-Droid. Of course, there's the Huawei App Gallery. So that's basically an Android-based thing. So you could bring your apps over there. There's the Amazon store. So that's an option. And of course, Amazon, unlike Huawei, are not, in any sort of under as much regulatory scrutiny as Huawei. So that might be an option. But have you considered any of those storefronts or not?
We haven't at the moment, but we're definitely open to launching on like all those sort of things. The only one maybe that we wouldn't was the open source one, because like the potential for like plagiarism under something like that would be like so high for something that has a small user base to start with. I feel like for us to go open source, we would have to wait until it got like bigger.
Okay, so that's interesting. So a lot of people who hang out on this Discord, it was originally the Library Community Podcast, but now I've kind of because that podcast ended, I've started doing my own thing over here. But that was an open source project that most of the people who hang around here are quite pro open source. But yeah, but of course I can see why you might not want to initially make your application open source, because it's good to be able to. Yeah, sorry.
I feel like for open source stuff, I feel like I like the idea of it, because like what the developer's doing, if there's any like things you got to look out for. I'm also very pro open source, but I do feel like for someone that's put like enough time into something, I feel like in order to be able to get that back, like the whatever you've spent on it, you've either got to be running ads, or in order to like make that make sense, or if it's like a paid application, it's got to get to like a certain size before you go, we'll go like open source, and then we'll just sort of run with it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of applications and lots of different programs start open source, but if you're actually trying to make a paid app, trying to get a bit for, your time and effort, I guess, for making this application, then yeah, open source isn't as much of a route, unless you wanted to potentially make an open source version which you have to like compile or something, and then a non-open source version. I've seen applications do that before, where you have to pay for a compiled version, and you don't have to pay for the code itself. So
okay.
That's something interesting, I guess. I mean, I've seen a few projects do that. I mean, you could just compile the app, I guess, but it's a bit more work, to be honest. So it encourages people to pay for the app. But
yeah.
So are you planning to keep your app paid on the long term, or are you planning to potentially launch a kind of free version of the app, or are you going to adopt more of a kind of freemium model? I know that's quite loaded there, but sure.
Yeah, it's this was actually something I've been thinking about like seriously for the last couple of weeks. So I was considering doing sort of like what Nova did, where you do like a free version and you put like a paywall, like where you can't use like say maybe install custom icon packs or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the paid version essentially gives you like all those features. I'm currently sticking with the paid model, because what I'm seeing a lot is a lot of the services out there that would say advertise your app, they will only deal with free applications, not paid. But I believe a lot of that is because they like send bots and like fake accounts to like make it seem like there's more users than there are. So I'm sort of in like a halfway house between which one of the two models I'm sort of want to go with.
Okay, interesting. I haven't heard of the kind of botting of app installs before. That's an interesting thing that I haven't really come across much.
It's really big, because it's like there's all these services that do like pay per install as like their payment model. It's like, for example, if you paid them, let's say $100, and that got you say 50 downloads, they say, oh, we'll advertise it on social media and this and that. But if you advertise something on social media, how do you guarantee only 50 people download it? How do you stop 51 people from downloading it, or 49 people from downloading it? In order to get an exact controlled number to that specific, and you can pay for like reviews and all these different things. And it's like, the only way I could imagine that actually working is if you're only going to do it for free apps, not paid. That means you're using fake accounts. You could not do it any other way, because otherwise it wouldn't make a difference whether an application is free or paid. Wouldn't matter.
Yeah, I can see that argument, and also, of course, if you want to, if you want to actually receive something for, the effort of making an app. I mean, it sounds like you've gone to some lengths to make this, given that it took you like 8 years. I don't.
Yeah.
Have we mentioned
8 years.
it on this? Have we mentioned it so far on this interview? The 8 years thing.
I don't, but yeah, for those that weren't here for the initial start, yeah, it was a 8-year development cycle, so it was kind of loaded. Lots of math and stuff like that. Some technical challenges with how scrolling works on Android.
And yeah, your other somebody who helped you out on about 30, as you said, 30% of like the work.
Yeah, dude is a legend. His name's Taku, so he has been working on a lot of the mathematics side of it for me. Just the technical challenges of how some of the things work, and like the fact that the app is infinitely scrolling, so it's like an open canvas. The math required for something like that is pretty serious. Like I had people coming directly out of like Unity doing, not Unity, sorry, university, and they would like computer science degrees, and they could not handle the mathematics. So I hired initially like 4 people as like a low income earner. I'd saved up all this money and I hired like 4 people just to sit on it and work, and they all couldn't do it. And in the end, I found this guy, and he was like really good with math. I have no idea what his history is. Like I put him up there with like Google employees. Like he's that smart. So he's been a massive help.
Cool. Yeah, it's always good if somebody can help you on, some of the hard parts of making things, because, that might not be your speciality. And if somebody can come in and do, some of it and, solve some of your problems when it comes to making it and making your kind of, your application idea a reality, then that's always a good thing. But
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so one of the last questions I wanted to ask you, are you planning to actually launch any other applications or programs or websites or whatever with the Taridium brand at any point in the future?
So I am working on something actually. So this is something I haven't announced or marketed or anything yet. I'm making a second app which I've been working on alongside of Taridium, which is sort of why Taridium took 8 years, because it was sort of like a part-time off and on thing. The application I'm working on, I'm calling Peakstar. So what this is think of like a video player where if you want to watch, say, a movie, you have your own collection of movies and TV shows. It shows them as like a list of names, right? But everyone that watches movies nowadays, we use stuff like Netflix, Stan, Hulu, all these sort of video streaming platforms, and they give you like the movie poster. You click on it and it will show you like some information about it, like what it's about, who stars in it, all that sort of stuff, right? So what I wanted to do was make an app that gave you full support for like all the different file types and things like that, and gives you the UI that you would expect from a video streaming platform, and gives you the option to not only cast those movies from, say, your phone to your TV, but also gives you the option to stream it from your mobile to, say, your tablet or what other sort of mobile devices you have. And I'm actually rather close to finishing that. I'm sort of working on some of the casting side of it and how we handle like the metadata, so like collecting movie posters and what have you.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. So, of course, because that's not not specific to customization, are you planning one day to actually launch that over on iOS? Because, a big user base there. Is that a consideration?
So this particular one at the moment, the development has been mostly Android. But yeah, definitely. For that project will come to iOS as well.
Yeah, because I imagine, it's like the iOS user base is quite big. Paid apps is something that a lot of iOS users are more on board with than Android. So if you're making this a paid app, I don't know if this is going to be paid or free of charge or what your plans are. But that's always a good market. So if you if you can ever do that, then that would be interesting, I guess.
iOS has sort of been a big challenge for Taridium because, like, normally when you start an app, it's like you get your friends to download it or your family and all that sort of stuff. But 90% of everyone I know has an iOS device. So if you don't launch on iOS and everyone you know has an Apple phone, it's like, well, essentially at that point you're left on your own to sort of market and try to get people to download it initially.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, personally, I know quite a lot of people who use iOS, and I'm an Android user personally. I really enjoy the customization. I enjoy, unlocking the bootloader on my phone, installing a custom ROM, all that stuff. But, of course, it's not everybody's cup of tea. Some people just like a simple user experience, and they use iOS for whatever reason. And that's quite a big base of people.
Yeah, I think iOS became as big as it has for two reasons. One, because Apple puts a premium price on their products. So instinctively, if you think of like, not to get like too deep into it, but if you think about how people think about products, everyone wants the best. So if you put a premium price on something, even if it's not that, everyone's going to want it because they know it's the best. So it's sort of like Rolex for watches. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best watch, but if everyone knows it's the most expensive, everyone's going to want it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do such a great job with like how they do UI and stuff like that. It makes everything they launch with just so easy to use.
Yeah, I think that is quite a big thing for iOS. But of course, some people don't really like how it restricts you from doing things such as, using a custom home screen like a launcher or, that kind of stuff, which quite a big problem for you, I guess, for iOS.
Yeah, I am on that bandwagon. I have never owned an Apple product and likely never will. Just because if I spend, say, $1,500 on a phone, I don't like being told how I can and can't use it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like my freedom, and one of the things they do that I find really quite scummy is, like, let's say you're buying a charging cord or something, like a third-party cords won't work on an Apple phone or an Apple computer. You got to have like the special Apple cords and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that is, that's quite a big problem with iOS, and quite a lot of the reason why I think a lot more techie people, some of them are fans of iOS, but if you're really into a customization, it's just kind of a no-go, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, imagine something you've probably covered, like tech news at some point. The Europe introduced a new law. I think this was about a month or so back. They said they made it official that anyone who wants to release an electrical product in 3 years' time, basically you have to have removable batteries in your products, and that's not just phones. That's like tablets, laptops, electrical cars, all of it. So in 3 years' time, basically any product that's sold in Europe is going to have basically a battery that the average person will be able to take out and easily change. So that's going to mean even Apple, for the first time at some point, they're going to be selling phones where it's not like a complete locked out back.
Yeah, it's gonna really depend on how the EU interpret that, because, like, if different manufacturers manage to find a way to make a somewhat removable battery, then I'm sure they will do that over a fully removable battery. But of course, it might be a bit of a cat and mouse game there. But if the EU manage to really put their foot down and make sure that different manufacturers actually make it user removable, then that will be quite interesting.
I'm really excited for it. be honest, because I like the idea of like being able to replace your battery if you need it, stuff like that. I love that.
Yeah. And also with Apple, there has been a bit of news to do with sideloading. Wasn't there like there have been some rumors about sideloading being added to iOS and some update stuff which suggests that it could be coming to phones in the EU because of regulation. I think it's the Digital, or is it the Digital Markets Act? I forget. I forget which thing it is that meant that Apple might have to open up their App Store, but sideloading could become a thing on iPhone. That might be quite interesting. But you know, you still won't be able to use custom launchers, so it's still a problem for you. But
I do love the concept of Apple like introducing more stuff like that though.
But yeah, another off-topic question I put in here. I mean, somebody asked me if I could ask this. It's a bit of a daft question. Do you know who the Muffin Man is?
I don't know him personally, but I hear he lives on Mary Lane somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that is a yes. Yeah. So somebody asked me if I could ask that, and they might be watching the podcast. Who knows? So I'm gonna ask that just for the.
With sense of humor, I might like that person.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's it with the questions. I mean, just thinking over things here. Are there any other questions that I can think of? I mean, if I have any other questions, might ask them later in the podcast if you're still around. But for now, I think that's the interview. So thank you guys for watching the interview. But now we're moving right along to the tech news. So moving on, so the first story is in the iPhone section, just discussing Apple here. So what color bubbles will RCS messages have? Well, Apple has actually confirmed the answer. So when Apple implements RCS in 2024, as they have promised, apparently these messages will still have green bubbles. So if you're an Android user, you aren't getting away from the green bubbles, I guess. I guess it's just something that Apple will just do until the end of time for anybody not using their product. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I don't think they'll change it because Apple is like very dead set on like the colors they use because they look into like color theory. So color theory like looks into like the feelings behind say like the color red. Like color red is viewed as like important, green is viewed as like calm. So
and also it's kind of in a way it is kind of device elitism, in the sense that there's kind of a thing to do with green bubbles and kind of, you know, it's not good if somebody has a green bubble. So if Apple can keep that, then of course they will, because they want their device to appear as, you know, the best option, and all of the text from, you know, Android users being in a different color because, you know, they might not support all the features of iMessage, you know, is something that they'll continue doing, I guess. But anyway, moving on along to the next story. So the other story in the iPhone section this week. So Apple have launched the new Apple Pencil with USB-C. And in the US, it's already being sold for $71. So apparently it's usually selling at $79. So I guess if you want a very small discount on an Apple Pencil, and you've been waiting to get that stylus for your iPad, then you can grab one now with USB-C. So they've added that new, that standard which they hadn't adopted previously because they were quite stubborn in using Lightning. But now they've kind of had their hand forced to use USB-C by the EU. But a lot of talk of the EU this week, I guess. We mentioned them before we got into tech news, and now we mention them after. I guess it's just Apple, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, they've been in the news a lot because of the Activision Blizzard buyout. So they've had a lot going on over there.
No, I think isn't that Microsoft? That's a Microsoft story, the Activision Blizzard stuff. Microsoft have bought out Activision Blizzard.
It is, but because of the CMA and the FTC, like the Europe's been in the news so much.
Yeah, the CMA's the UK authority, isn't it? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that's the. Is that the? Let me look that up on stream. What is the CMA again? Is that the UK? Yeah, it's the Competition and Markets Authority of the UK. Activision is Activision Blizzard based in the UK? Was it based in the UK? I mean, do you know?
I'm actually sure, to be honest.
I'm gonna look it up on stream here. It's not helpful that my VPN is in it's set to Germany, so this is a German article, but I can see the information here. So no, they were based in the US. But I think there was problems with the CMA. I forget what it was to do with. I think Nvidia had some problems with the CMA. They were trying to buy ARM, and they had some problems with the UK regulator. But that's a separate story.
Yeah, the very version there was issues with cloud streaming, basically.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember that now. But moving on to the Android section. So, only one story this week with Android. A lot in the miscellaneous, actually, so we'll have a lot to cover there. But it's another story continuing on with talking about this Vega OS. So, Amazon have apparently already ditched Android for its own Vega OS on the Echo Show 5. So they apparently have already implemented this new operating system, which they've been developing already on one of their smart devices. So apparently it looks very similar to the Fire OS. So the main difference is really what is happening under the hood. So now it will be running this new Vega OS, which is not directly based on Android. Now it's based on Linux. So that's a bit of a change for Amazon. However, maybe it will allow Amazon to make the Vega OS and make their device more kind of make the OS more lightweight, because of course basing things on Android, there's always the bloat of the kind of base Android to deal with, whereas Linux on a base level is quite lightweight. So of course this allows Amazon to go in its own direction and actually go its own path when it comes to development, and we'll just have to see where this goes. But
on a side note to that,
yep.
Curious to know if they're changing the operating system because they want to, or because they're trying to stop people from getting free Amazon Prime. Because a big thing with some of their products they've released is you can go on eBay and buy like a hacked device from that. And basically what it does, it's sort of like a jailbroken device from iOS, or the equivalent of like a rooted device for Android.
Mm-hmm.
and it opens it up. People were using that to get like free Amazon Prime. So by changing the operating system, maybe that like stops that from being a thing anymore.
Oh, that's an interesting perspective. I've not heard of people being able to do that before, because I've not really played much around with Amazon devices. I mean, personally, I've rooted my phone before and, messed around with it, but that's a OnePlus phone. That is not a Amazon device. So my experience with Amazon is quite limited, but I think it's very interesting them trying to make this new OS. It might be because of what you just said. Maybe it's because they don't want people trying to get free Amazon Prime using this, hack devices. But of course, there's probably other things that they're considering. Maybe they're looking at the fact that Huawei have implemented their new OS, which is of course based quite heavily on Android, but they're going their own way there, and so is Xiaomi. So, as quite a big competitor to Google, maybe they view it as a good thing, being able to move away from Google's own OS and move to something they actually develop themselves, of course with the use of Linux, but that's of course the base of Android to start with.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah, so moving on, I've got a PC story from last week here, so that is not something that we're covering this week. But moving on to the Linux distro releases. So Netgear, not Netgear, Netgate. There's an important distinction there. Netgear is a very different company. Netgate have released pfSense CE software version 2.7.1. So this is quite an incremental update for the users of pfSense. So of course, quite an important networking operating system. But the updates that have took place, so OpenSSL has been upgraded to 3.0.12, and that's because the previous version they were using had reached end of life, and so it was no longer receiving security patches. And of course, with SSL, it's very important that you have the proper security, because SSL is something that's quite important to your operating system's security. But apart from that, apparently the key DHCP is now an opt-in feature, so it's now an added opt-in feature. So that probably means something to somebody out there. So if you're using pfSense, just make sure to upgrade, I guess. Have you ever tried pfSense, Lord Paul?
I can't say I have.
Have you ever tried Linux in general?
I want to, but I haven't.
Oh, okay. If you were gonna try a Linux distro, what distro would you try?
My old boss was trying to get me to use Ubuntu for a while.
Oh, okay, Ubuntu's, yeah, that's quite a popular distro, probably the biggest one out there. But yeah, there's all sorts of options out there. I mean, there's like Linux Mint, if you're looking for something very user-friendly. There's, of course, Arch Linux, if you're looking for something quite hard to install, but, worthwhile if you...
What do you mean?
Yeah, I know. Piggis here is an Arch Linux user. I mean, what do you want to say about Arch Linux, Piggis?
It's not hard.
It's not hard. So, it is, for most people, it's quite hard, Piggis. I'm pretty sure if you gave... Yeah.
Just read the documentation.
Yeah, so if you read the documentation, you can install it, but it's nowhere near as easy to install as, like, most Linux distros like Linux Mint or Ubuntu, or of course Windows if you're not using Linux, I guess. Because you don't have that same GUI guided experience to actually install your operating system. So that's a thing to consider. Yeah, you have to enter a lot of terminal commands in to get things working. But,
Not really, not anymore. You can just use the installer script.
Oh, okay. So maybe okay, but you still have to. But if something goes wrong with the installer script, then you might have to enter some commands, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It's sort of been like almost like a turn off because the learning curve for something like Linux is quite high, I feel like. But it's definitely like the most rewarding because if you learn all that, like the limit, what you can do with Linux is so much.
Yeah, I mean, the learning curve, there's not really as much of a learning curve with easier distros. So if you pick up like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or even like Fedora or whatever, it's a lot easier to get started than some of the harder distros. I mean, you can kind of install it and see if, or try it on live USB and see if it actually works for you and whether, you can actually, move your mouse about and stuff before you install your operating system. But yeah, it's not that much of a learning curve. I think a lot less than some Windows users think. But yeah, of course there is a learning curve there, so that's one thing. Yeah. But yeah, and also if you're into customization, I think Linux is probably a good option.
Yeah, my current Windows computer is almost set up like an Apple computer, like with its UI. Like I've got like the taskbar set up, so like all of my icons are in the middle and everything like that. It's yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're using some, I'm guessing you're using some applications to configure that, right?
I thought I'd have to, and I actually downloaded something for it, but it turns out no, you don't have to. So, if you move around the guides and the rulers on the taskbar, it like does like this weird thing where it like pushes everything into the middle, and I'm not sure why it does it, but yeah, it does it. So you don't actually need like any custom configurations to do that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, so yeah, we should probably move on to the next story, shouldn't we? That was interesting though. But yeah, if you do ever try out Linux, it is quite interesting, especially if you want to kind of try different desktop environments and see what you like. There's kind of more Mac like things. There's more Windows like things. There's stuff like Ubuntu, which has a bit of a kind of different look with the GNOME desktop. Yeah, you can really try all sorts of different things, and yeah, it's quite interesting. Also, if you have like a Raspberry Pi, then you can try stuff out without having to worry about your main machine. Although Raspberry Pi circulation, when it comes to being able to actually buy one, it's not as bad as it was, but it's not as it's not the easiest device to obtain. Last time I checked.
That's like a large device for like modding and creating things with.
It's quite a small. It's quite. I would say it's a small device. I mean, it's like a board. It's like a small board,
Yeah.
which like costs about. It depends on which one you buy. If you buy the cheap model, yeah. It depends on which one you buy, effectively.
I more meant large as in like it's like how many people use it, but yeah.
Oh, you meant oh, I thought you meant large, as in I thought you meant it's like a desktop tower. Yeah, no, okay.
It's all...
That was a bit of a misunderstanding there. Sorry about that.
you're right.
But yeah, so moving on to the next story. So going into the broadband and cellular section. So here's a UK story. Only put one in this week. And that is that Virgin Media's UK customers are apparently being plagued by phantom Netflix bills. So apparently, if you're on the ISP in the UK, Virgin Media, then you might experience some Netflix bills which actually aren't yours. So there's been a number of complaints about this problem. Basically, where they're getting charged for Netflix when they didn't actually pay, when they didn't actually use Netflix. So this is quite an annoying thing. I mean, getting £16 taken off you per month without anybody asking you beforehand is quite annoying, I'm sure, for these people. And it appears to just be randomly happening, and Virgin Media is apparently the ones responsible for taking these payments. And apparently they also are saying that they're sorry to their customers who experience this issue, and apparently they're working hard to resolve it. But yeah, it's a bit of a strange story, I've got to say. I mean, randomly getting billed for things that you didn't actually pay for, you didn't actually want to pay for, is not a good situation. So maybe somebody at the accounting of Virgin has got something horribly wrong here. I don't know. Have you got any thoughts? I mean,
I think they're lucky that they were a UK-based company, because I think if it was a US-based company, they'd probably be getting like more people trying to create like lawsuits and things like that.
yes, in the UK there's a lot less of a suing culture, but in the US, there's a lot of people suing other people for things. So if they'd done this in the US, then they might be in more trouble. But I don't think they will. Most people in the UK will just complain and then just complain a bit about it, but like probably won't take it to a lawsuit.
Yeah. Australia's got a very similar culture in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the American lawsuit culture is quite a bit different, because in the UK, if you are gonna file a lawsuit, people kind of are like, let's not file a lawsuit unless it's something really, really, really bad. It's like, last resort, and it's a total last resort for most people. I mean, in the US, it's probably people's last resort, but of course, slightly less, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the miscellaneous section. So, Crunchyroll will be discontinuing its own manga app next month. So, after 10 years of being on the App Store, the Crunchyroll manga app will be delisted from the App Store in December. So, apparently, Crunchyroll say that this is, quote, a part of their, quote, continuous effort to provide fans with the best experience surrounding their favourite series. And while it hasn't been... so basically, for some reason, the person who wrote this article, for some reason there isn't actually an end to these quotes. There's no end quotes. There's only the start quotes. I don't know why they did that. But anyway, that made it a bit difficult to read. But yeah, so basically Crunchyroll are saying that they want to provide the best experience possible. Normal PR speak, to be honest. Whenever you do something, it's like, we're just trying to improve things for the customers. But, of course, it's probably because this service wasn't used as much as their anime service. And, they're one of the biggest platforms for watching anime. So they're cutting their manga service. And for those users who don't really have many alternatives, it will be quite sad. But, of course, I don't think... there'll be that much outrage over this, but of course, trying to maximize profits and trying to kind of make the most money possible for the people involved does mean that you might have to cut some unprofitable applications. Do you have any thoughts? Anybody?
I'm not a huge fan of Crunchyroll, just because I tried one of their other services called Funimation, which is sort of like their dubbed anime. Is basically where they throw all that stuff in. And I tried to watch My Hero Academia like a month ago for the first time, and I'm not sure if it's like the app that's dodgy or if it's like just the fact that they don't have many servers out in Australia. But like every time I tried to click on an episode, it like wouldn't let me watch it, and it was like there was no servers to connect to almost.
Oh, interesting. That's not great. I don't think. Oh no, they're both owned by Sony, I guess. Or are they owned by Sony? Is Crunchyroll owned by Sony? Let's find out. I think it is. Yes, I think it is. So they are both owned by Sony. So both Funimation and Crunchyroll. So I was just checking that quickly. That's different from when I last checked, I think. But yeah, so yeah, I haven't really had much calling to watch stuff on these anime streaming sites, because I've mainly watched most of the anime stuff that I've checked out on Netflix. I mean, I checked out, I forget what the name of it is. It's like the thing where there's like somebody who delivers parcel. Kiki's Delivery Service. There we are. That's one of the only animes I've ever watched, and it was a decent one. It's actually quite worth it. It's a good movie. But yeah. So apart from that, I haven't watched any animes. I've heard that. I've heard a number of interesting animes are out there. But I just haven't really invested the time to watch them. I mean, I have some manga books. I've read through some of them. Some Dragon Ball stuff. But apart from that, I've not really had much,
Have you ever played a game called Jet Set Radio by any chance?
Dead Set Radio? No, I haven't. So.
I was gonna say that game was quite popular for a while, and there is an anime based on that called Air Gear.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so moving on to the next story, a bit of a Google one here. So we haven't really talked much about Google this episode. We've been giving a lot of time to talk about Apple here, but now here's a Google story. Just before we have another Apple one. So Google Maps is rolling out its new color palette worldwide on all of the Maps apps. So now nobody will be able to escape the terror of the new color palette. Of course, it looks a lot more like Apple Maps. You can, take that as a good thing, take that as a bad thing. Personally, I'm not really sure on it. I mean, I was fine with the Google Maps look before. It's not really too bad, but it does look slightly strange, to be honest, for, somebody who's used to actually look at Google Maps. This new look is slightly strange, but of course, they're trying to make things look slightly more appealing, and clearly this is what they've assessed to be the correct course of action. But yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts on this colour palette? I mean, is anybody a fan of this colour palette? Is anybody not?
Not really phased, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really much of a change, but Google Maps have looked the same for quite a while at this point. So something, just a little change like the colour palette, you notice it, and it's kind of there, and you're just like, okay, I guess. But yeah, it does seem a bit like they're just copying Apple here, to be honest, with the colour palette, which isn't particularly great. Yeah.
I just hope that the change sort of helps make Street View more apparent, because when you try to do a Street View, it's not always apparent what streets can do it and what streets can't. There's certain streets I've had where I've tried to get a Street View because I've thought, I can't do that, and then when I actually click on it, it offers me the option for a Street View.
Ooh.
So I'm like, all right.
Yeah, that does seem like a bit of a problem with Google Maps. I mean, yeah, I've had some problems with trying to get Street View up. I mean, I used to use Google Earth. I don't use Google Earth anymore, but like that used to be a thing that I used to use. I don't know if does anybody still use Google Earth? I don't know. I'm not really informed on this. Do,
Don't think that was sort of like all the hype a while ago, and then it was sort of like one of those like gimmicks, like it just sort of fell off a bit.
yeah. Yeah, I think people kind of checked it out. They were like, "Oh, it's cool seeing all the different planets and all this stuff," and then it's like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess,
It
yeah." What do you think?
it very quickly fell off from like a gimmick where everyone like sees their house and like where their friends live to like what like a few random people would just use it to try to find like secret government conspiracies and all that sort of thing.
Yes, of course, Google Maps is good enough for most people. They're not trying to, plan their interstellar uh, mission, for next weekend or whatever. That's probably not most people's use case. Most people just want to plot a thing from A to B. They don't really want that much hassle, and for that use, Google Maps is quite good. So yeah, I think
It is.
that's the reason why people don't use Google Earth. But yeah, so moving on to the next story. So the last Apple story. Somebody might be glad to hear that. I don't know. But Apple Music fraud has fallen by about 30%, according to a new report, after Apple beefed up their protections against so-called streaming manipulation. So apparently, Apple Music rolled out some more fraud protections, including hitting repeat offenders with financial adjustments. So apparently, this has somehow caused the amount of streaming manipulation to drop by 30%. So I don't really know how this actually works. Like, how is this fraud? I don't know exactly. Do you have any clue?
Maybe it was like some sort of account sharing thing, because I know that like Netflix tried something like that. I think like last year or something like that, because people were like they'd like pay for their Netflix, and then they'd like give their password to like their girlfriend or their brother or sister or something like that. So maybe this is like Apple's sort of like equivalent,
Oh
where
no.
people were like,
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say. I just read that. Yeah. So basically, it is. There's artificial streams, which is a big problem for them. Where basically, because Apple pays royalty per track, if people are botting, basically, if they can use bots to play back their music, they can get money from it. So that was a problem for them, I guess. But they're lowering that amount of fraud, I'm guessing. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
it kind of reminds me of what you were saying earlier with people, paying for like app downloads and then like people download like using bots to download apps. Yeah, it's basically like when there's money involved and when there's accounts involved and downloads involved and you're gonna get bots. It's just gonna happen. Like people are gonna try their hand at getting some money out of the system. That's just the natural way of things, I guess. Of course people are gonna try it, but of course Apple are trying to clamp down now on those people.
I think personally that the next step for the internet is to introduce a security protocol where there's a limit of requests that you can make to a certain, like, say, website address or whatever per second. And doing so would basically defeat bots entirely, because you wouldn't be able to make like 1,000 requests per second. Because a person could, say, make 2 or 3 at most.
Yeah, I imagine that would be maybe a bit of a kind of concern for some people, because some people do have legitimate reasons for doing things like that. I mean, on certain platforms, maybe they'll implement stuff like that. That's just rate limiting, effectively. But if if you did that on a network level, you could see privacy concerns there. You could see concerns when it comes to just in general. So that is one potential solution, but I imagine it being met with a lot of criticism. Yeah. I mean, there's already rate limiting. If you send too many requests to one site, they do usually block you off. But it's the real problem with people having so many different IP addresses and, like, you know, doing all sorts of stuff to try and evade detection, effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on to the next story. This is an interesting one. Have you checked out Blue Sky, Paul?
Have not.
Well, apparently, I haven't either. Apparently, Blue Sky has hit 2 million users. And they've said that public web interface and federation are both coming. So, exactly a year ago, from a day ago, the first post on Blue Sky was created. And apparently, they will... now to, you know, celebrate this milestone and celebrate the fact that they now have 2 million users, you know, from actually only having 1 million users a couple months ago, so quite a big jump there. They have announced that around the end of this month, you'll be able to view posts on Blue Sky without having to log into an account. So that's quite a big announcement, but just to add stuff to it, apparently they've also announced that that Federation is now going to be on the table. They're going to actually implement it. They previously talked about this, but now they have actually announced that they will be implementing Federation soon. Of course, you know, being able to federate between different instances would be a great feature. If they could implement something like ActivityPub and have more interoperability with Mastodon and other platforms that already do social media on the Fediverse, then that would be quite helpful. Of course, people enjoy being able to see their posts on a different server, you know, and being able to have that into that kind of exchange, which is, you know, one of the core things with Mastodon and a lot of those kind of platforms. But yeah, do you have any thoughts, Paul? Have you tried Mastodon at any point, or have you tried any ActivityPub based thing?
Haven't really, to be honest. I haven't messed with a lot of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. I mean, I know Pigis here. Yeah, so he's tried out Mastodon before, so have I. And it's quite an interesting, you know, way of doing social media. It's quite different when it comes to being able to host stuff on different servers, and those being on a different server and actually being able to see the posts from, you know, somebody else's server on, you know, yeah, it's quite different. Instead of having such a centralized system, something more decentralized. It's quite interesting, especially when it comes to having your own moderation on your own instance, deciding, you know, what you allow, what you don't allow on your particular server, and, you know, being able to have that granular level control is quite a interesting feature. Of course,
it definitely sounds pretty.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. I was just saying it sounds pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, Discord is sometimes a problem when you jump into something and then you realise that somebody on the other thing is just saying something. You know, it's always hard with voice activity. But anyway. But yeah, so yeah, I think it's quite interesting if Blue Sky are going to try and implement Federation. If it's just between different Blue Sky instances, that'll be alright. But of course, if they introduce Activity Pub, that will be definitely an interesting thing. If people from Mastodon can also communicate with Blue Sky users, that would be very cool. That would show the openness of this platform, but we'll just have to wait and see what happens here. Moving on along to the next story. So Microsoft has Microsoft are apparently bringing message truncation. There we are. I was talking about this earlier with Piggis. Piggis kind of was like, "What did you say?" And I said truncation, and we were checking that I was actually saying it correctly. I was, but it threw a bit of a spanner into the works there. But yeah, that's how you would say it. Paul, would you say it truncation?
Yeah, that's how I say it too, yeah.
Yeah, it's a word that I see written down. I don't say it. But yeah, so basically, there'll be more of a summary. So they'll actually be able to summarize a bit more what the message says instead of, giving you the full thing. So that's an interesting feature, trying to use potentially AI or just trying to shorten messages to provide a cleaner chat experience. I don't know if people want this. I don't know if people really need this. It's a very strange feature, but I'm sure there's a user out there that would enjoy this feature. But yeah, it does seem like Skype is continually trying to find a reason to exist. I mean, there was MSN Messenger before Skype, and back then, it was a lot more popular, and then there was Skype, and, that was popular for video calling for a while. Skype was the premier video calling platform. People used to call on Skype and said, "Skype me," but now that's no longer really a thing. So Skype, after Microsoft bought it, Microsoft have been trying to see where to fit it in their ecosystem. If it was Google, I'm fairly sure Skype by this point would be dead. They would have just killed it off. But because it's Microsoft, they keep legacy products around for a bit longer, and they try and see what they can do with them. Except from the Zune. And the Windows Phone. Anyway, but apart from those things, they do usually try and see if they can fix a product and find a use case for it. And they are clearly trying to do that with Skype. Do you use Skype, Paul? Do you? I mean, it's not really that popular anymore, but I'm sure there are still users out there.
I have only used Skype once, and it was actually to help out my sister because when my sister was younger, she got into a bit of a situation where she kept installing Skype, and the amount of scammers that were on there that were trying to access and send viruses to people's computer was pretty serious.
Yeah.
At that point, but that's the experience with Skype, to be honest.
Yeah, I do know the spam you were talking about. I've used Skype before. It's not the best user experience, but it for the time it was decent. People trying to do video calls. But now WhatsApp and FaceTime have all took its place, and so it's really gonna find it hard to find the market for it. People, moving over to mobile, abandoning, Windows Phone, not really succeeding, kind of abandoning their desktop. It's not really that good for Skype, because their main user base was people on desktop, and they're owned by Microsoft. So they were trying to promote it on Windows Phone. Windows Phone didn't work out. WhatsApp is popular on Android. It's all over, in almost every way. This is not a good equation, for Microsoft, I guess, when it comes to using Skype. And of course with Teams and, that different work experience. There's less space for Skype now. So I think it will be interesting to see how long Microsoft can keep Skype going. Whether they might one day revert to the MSN Messenger branding, who knows what would happen in the future. Maybe maybe Microsoft might do that for nostalgia one day. Who knows? You never know with companies.
I think Skype lost its user base pretty much to Zoom, because now when you talk about video streaming, most people will just say, "Oh, we'll create like a Zoom call or something like that."
Yeah, I forgot to mention it's one of those platforms that I don't use, so it kind of gets out of my mind. But I need to remember, so many people use it. So that's a really something that, there's so many competitors in that space, and Skype it's gonna be quite hard for them to find a, raison d'etre, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also MSN Messenger was quite popular, and then they killed it off and put Skype in the place, and it just hasn't filled the same role, has it? Yeah.
Yeah, it really hasn't.
Yeah, and of course, yeah, it was just seen as a different thing. It was seen as video calling, and now they're trying to do direct messaging using it, and that was the idea, but it never really took off in that capacity. Anyway, moving on to the next story, a story for the developers and for the users. Google Chrome is adding some big changes to extensions. So, Google previously announced they were deprecating Manifest v2, and they were getting rid of it and deactivating v2 extensions. However, they've changed the timeline. Previously, they cancelled it, and now they're saying that apparently it will be, Manifest v2 will be discontinued in June 2024. So there were some pretty big implications for Adblock developers. Some of the APIs they were using really were taken away from them, and they were really not sure how to provide this proper browsing experience. Trying to actually be able to block the ads and the scripts that users wanted. Now, they tried to address some of these concerns, and they have improved it, apparently by giving better content filtering support, background playback enhancements, and a user scripts API. So apparently AdGuard, one big ad block provider, has said that they're quite optimistic about Google's changes. However, the EFF still aren't really that happy with Google getting rid of Manifest v2 and using this new kind of standard for extensions, where a lot of the APIs that they were using for privacy purposes are being taken away from them. So that's quite annoying for people in the privacy community, I guess.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what happens, because, as you said, AdGuard's very big, so they're likely to have a very big, developer base that'll always keep everything up to date. But I'm very curious to see what happens with the extensions from, just, single developers that probably, built it, out as, a fun passion project, because those are the sort of things likely that won't get updated.
Yeah, the best, in my humble opinion, the best ad block is probably uBlock Origin, because it gives you, or uMatrix, depending on, what you want. But I personally use uBlock Origin, and that is a community project. It does give you a lot of control, but it's basically from one guy. One guy develops it. So, of course he will get some contributions with his code, because it's open source. But it will be pretty hard for him to maintain this. uBlock Origin is one of the most popular extensions, and I haven't seen their response to this big change. I mean, you know, I've heard that initially it was, you know, pretty negative. However, I don't know how they're going to respond to this new, you know, changes, you know, improvements, supposedly.
Yeah.
Now, the other angle I can take on it here is that Google, they've been rolling out a lot of anti-ad block stuff on YouTube. I mean, they've kind of rolled back on it a bit now. But they have been blocking ad block increasingly, and now they've, you know, kind of put their took their foot off the pedal, I guess. You know, that they've kind of tried to move away from that potentially because it was quite unpopular. But they were trying to block ad block on YouTube, saying that if you don't disable your ad block, you can't use the YouTube player, and that would have annoyed a lot of users. But it just shows Google's anti-ad block strategy as an ad company. Of course, they do want to make as much money as possible as a public company. And if they can do that by getting rid of ad block and privacy protections, then that might be something that they try and do. That's my other take on it, I think.
I really, really don't like YouTube's like ad policy because, like, I'm all for like blocking ad blockers and things like that because, like, I get it, like they're a business model, they have to keep it going, all that sort of thing. But don't give me two ads back to back that are both 15 seconds long that can't be skipped. That's so scummy.
Yeah, it is quite it's quite annoying, to be honest, that how they're just trying to kind of milk the kind of YouTube ad money, and they don't give, you know, so much of it to creators. I mean, they do give, you know, quite a decent chunk, but, you know, them doubling down on the anti-ad block stuff, I can kind of see where they're coming from in some respects, but in other respects, it's just such a lockdown way of doing things. I mean, YouTube was making money beforehand, so, I mean, you know, showing the back-to-back ads, I mean, could probably, that they started, you know, they stopped losing so much money off it, so, you know, maybe they didn't have to do this, but of course, for their profit margins, they did.
I think personally, I mean, I'm not their business guy or anything like that, but if it was me and that was my company, I would be running it very different because the way they do it is like everything's got to be advertiser friendly, but every brand has its audience, right? So it's such a broken way of thinking because let's say you make some edgy kind of video and you say some comments that like some very kid-friendly brand probably isn't going to like. There's probably 10 others that are going to absolutely adore you for it. So instead of demonetizing the video, I feel like what they should do is they should have like its own category. So say instead of demonetization, putting it in that category would put you like in almost like a subcategory of, all right, we're going to just put all of these advertisers that are going to like that sort of content. Those are the ones that are going to give you ads. So you don't actually lose money. You'll just get different kind of ads on your channel.
Yeah, I don't get why they haven't just, you know, done that now. Because the thing is, there's YouTube Kids. They did this for the children's regulations. They have their own website for the kids' content. So, like, I don't really see why, you know, children-friendly advertisers, why that would really be as much of a problem now. Because, you know, those content marked as for kids, you know, that's the stuff that ends up on YouTube Kids and, you know, won't get those, you know, more dangerous, not dangerous, but, you know, more adult videos on there with, you know, those topics. But, like, you know, why can't they just do that at this point? Because, like, you know, they've already got the kind of apparatus set up, like, to, you know, allow for, you know, less demonetization on the platform. Like, maybe it's just the advertisers, you know, but But
Yeah, I feel like to implement a system like that, I feel like they'd get a lot more attention because with Twitch implementing like all these like rules and sort of cracking down, I feel like more creators would go to YouTube to stream or to make videos and stuff like that. But the fear of demonetization instead of just recommending you to a different advertiser is like, I feel like that's the turnoff.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's definitely something to consider for Google, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's really it when it comes to the stories. Yeah, it's been great doing the podcast today. It was great doing this interview, and it was also great covering the stories. Um, but yeah, so before we end today, I would like to say that I'm also going to be putting out a review at some point. I can't really put a date on it at the current moment, but I will be putting out a review for Taridium. And yeah, so if anybody wants to check out Taridium, I'll put the link on screen. It's quite interesting, this project that you've started. So thanks for coming along and sharing some of the details with us. And yeah,
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
and also thanks for supplying me the app down. Yeah,
It's all good.
yeah. So yeah, so I can actually review it, and yeah, I don't have Google Play on my phone, so like, I can't actually, even if if I wanted to, I can't actually download paid apps because like, yeah, I don't have a
Yeah.
device with Google Play on it. But anyway,
I love
sorry.
de-googled phone. I love the concept of de-googled phones.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, I personally use EOS. It's quite good. You can actually block trackers on the device level. You don't need to use some weird, VPN service. You can actually use your VPN alongside tracker blocking, because that's on the kind of system level. There's also location spoofing, which is an interesting concept. If apps are trying to take your location, who knows what purpose they're using it for. Some apps have some pretty malicious stuff going on. Yeah, if you want to be a bit more safe there, you can of course set a random location or a specific location. I find that interesting. And with MicroG, being able to actually use Google Play services, a lot of the stuff that relies on it more reliably is actually quite a bonus. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
But anyway, thanks.
oh, so,
I appreciate.
Mhm.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on for the podcast.
So yeah, one of the last questions I was going to ask you, have you ever tried any de-googled Android phones or any custom ROMs or anything like that? Just curious.
I haven't. My current phone is a Alcatel WP19, which basically has like a 21,000 milliamp hour battery. Things like a brick. I chose that, but before I bought it, I was going to just to get a phone and just de-Google it and have that whole like experience. But because I was like developing apps, I felt like it was like counterintuitive to get like a de-Googled phone.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to develop stuff on the Google, software ecosystem, and you also have a de-Googled phone, it's a total pain. So yeah, I can see why you wouldn't want to do that. But what is if you're, I mean, are you based in Australia?
I am, yeah, Melbourne, Australia.
Okay. So what is the price in Australia for your launcher? I'm just curious.
It's $3 in Australian.
Okay.
I'm not sure how that translates in other currencies though.
Yeah, because I'm here on the page, of course, because I've not logged in. It doesn't know that I'm not from Germany because I've got a VPN on. So it's showing the euro price here. Apparently €1.79 if you're in Germany or any of the EU countries which use the euro. So yeah, so
It is available.
Oh, sorry.
It's available in 172 countries. Which, fun fact, if you try to make it available in all those places, it means every year you will have to do a tax return in Singapore, Taiwan, and the US, as well as your own country.
Oh, gee. That's a lot.
So I'm going to have to create a tax return for Singapore and Taiwan, and I don't know how to speak those languages, so that is going to be a fun challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, hopefully there must be somebody in their tax office that knows English. I mean, like Taiwan. I mean, there's a lot of English speakers there. I'm fairly sure. Like, as in, I'm sure as an international language, you'll be able to get somebody to understand your emails potentially. But yeah, why do you have to do that? I mean, what's the technical reason for that? Do you know?
Google, whenever you put an app on the store, it asks you what countries you want it available. Mm-hmm. So me just thinking, I want everyone to be able to have it if they want it. I clicked every country. So when I did that, it basically, I didn't know, but it told me straight away that, all right, now because you've launched it in these countries have laws that any business that operates within it has to report all its tax to them. So Google does that automatically for you. But through doing that, like, you then have to file tax returns.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so you're probably very glad that it turns out not the full 179 countries that it's listed in, you all have to file tax returns. Imagine that.
I'm almost like half in like a state of mind of just removing it from Singapore and Taiwan, just so I don't have to like do a tax return there. But I'm sort of gonna see how it goes for like the first year. If I can like find like a tax agent that's willing to do it for me, then I'll just keep it there. Otherwise, maybe I like just remove it just for like making my own sanity.
Yes. Also, yeah, it might not be worth the cost to build of getting somebody to actually figure out how you're gonna file these tax returns. So do you have to file them in the US as well? Do you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, the US have some weird, extra. Isn't it called? I forget what it's called. Is it not extraterrestrial? I don't remember what it's called. It's like taxation law where if you're a US citizen, you get taxed like anywhere you live. I mean, that kind of stuff the iOS do. Like, yeah.
The US is very unique because let's say you decided overnight that you're tired of living wherever you live and you wanted to buy a block of land in America, even if you don't live there. You can actually buy a block of land in America, own it, and you will pay the same taxes as them, but a little bit higher. So all of their tax laws, like for foreigners, are so weird.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never looked into the tax law of owning property in the US. Not really something that's crossed my mind too much, but yeah, that's interesting. Personally, I've only lived in the UK, so only aware of how the tax system around here works. But yes, HMRC. What's the Australian equivalent of HMRC or iOS or what?
What's HMRC?
Her Majesty, not Her Majesty's revenues and customs service. I think I don't remember. It's basically tax collectors, the people who will come after you, like the iOS for not paying you tax. What's the Australian?
We don't really have that. The closest thing we have is just like the taxation department. So it's like a government department. We call it the Australian Tax Department, and or ATO for short. And they basically handle everything tax related. So you'll just go through them, and like once a year, you'll tell them like they know everything you've earned because everything's reported to them automatically. So once a year, you'll just go to them and basically file a tax return and get X amount back.
Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, so today we've went quite broad on this podcast. We went from Nintendo 64 to tax law, but yeah, so we've covered a bit today. But I think it's a good time to conclude things. If you want to check out the launcher, the links on screen. Have you thought about launching a website for your thing? I mean, like, I don't know. Right now, it's quite hard to find. Have you thought about doing something like that?
That's definitely something I'm going to be doing down the road because it needs a landing page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some easy ways you can do stuff like that, but yeah, so at some point I'll be releasing a review of the launcher, so make sure to check that out when that comes out, because there's not really that many users right now, so the likelihood of too many people completing reviews on it, it'll be interesting to see what my conclusions are, I guess. I've checked it out a bit already, so I already have some idea. But yeah, thank you once again for coming along today. And yeah,
No.
Yeah, so check out the Discord, sandrolex.com/Discord, and see you in the next one, guys.
See ya.
Goodbye.